The Kestrel Gate drifted against the void like a monument to someone else's confidence. Its outer ring glittered with polished alloys and ceremonial lighting, every curve designed to be admired from a distance. Commander Amina Reyes watched it grow in the viewport and felt the familiar tightening behind her eyes, the quiet pressure that came when diplomacy pretended it wasn't backed by guns. "Docking clearance confirmed," her pilot said. "They've assigned us Bay 7. Honorary." Amina smiled without warmth. Honorary usually means observable. The shuttle slid into the bay, magnetic clamps locking with a thud that traveled up through the deck plates. As the engines powered down, the ship fell into a manufactured silence, broken only by the faint hum of station systems. Amina rose, straightened her uniform, and checked the insignia at her collar. United Terran Navy. Fleet Liaison. Diplomat when necessary. Shield when not. The airlock cycled open. The welcoming party was flawless. Too flawless. A line of attendants in muted robes, flanked by Vayari honor guards whose armor gleamed like oil on water. Their rifles were ceremonial in name only. The barrels tracked her movement with lazy precision. Drones hovered near the ceiling, lenses adjusting, recording everything. Amina stepped forward. "Commander Reyes," said the lead attendant, a thin, reed-voiced being with opalescent skin. "On behalf of the Assembly, we welcome humanity to the Kestrel Gate." The words were correct. The tone was not. It carried the careful neutrality of someone who had learned that enthusiasm was dangerous. "Thank you," Amina replied. "We appreciate the invitation." As they walked, the corridor opened into a vast atrium. Transparent walls revealed a dead moon below, its cratered surface half-lit by a distant star. Above it all arced the inner ring of the station, banners suspended in perfect symmetry, each one a declaration of membership, hierarchy, and survival. Eyes followed her. Some curious. Some hopeful. Most afraid. Amina catalogued faces as she passed, a trilateral delegate whose frills lay flat against their neck, a mammalian envoy clutching a data slate too tightly, a cluster of insectile representatives murmuring in pheromone-coded whispers. They all wore the same expression beneath their differences, the look of people who had learned to nod at power. Her aide, Lieutenant Chen, leaned closer. "They've seated the Vayari delegation at the central dais." "Of course they have," Amina said softly. "Gravity works best from the middle." They entered the assembly chamber. It was circular, tiered like an amphitheater, with a long observation window dominating one side. Beyond it, the void stretched endless and dark. The central dais rose like a stage, polished to a mirror sheen. That was where the Vayari waited. High Admiral Sarketh Von stood as Amina approached, his elongated frame draped in a formal mantle edged with luminous thread. His scales caught the light in shifting shades of deep green and bronze. His eyes, amber, slit-pupilled, focused on her with open interest. "Commander Reyes," he said, voice smooth and resonant. "At last. Humanity arrives." Amina inclined her head. "High Admiral. Thank you for receiving us." Sarketha's smile exposed the faint suggestion of teeth. "We have watched your species with admiration. Your expansion has been energetic." The word landed exactly where he intended. "We've been busy," Amina replied. "Space has a way of encouraging efficiency." A ripple of soft amusement moved through the Vayari delegation. Sarketh gestured for her to take the opposite seat. As she sat, the chamber settled, attention tightening like a drawn wire. Sarketh spread his hands. "The assembly has gathered for a demonstration. A tradition of the hegemony. We show our strength so that peace may follow." Amina folded her hands on the table. "A demonstration of what parameters?" A few murmurs rippled outward. Sarketha's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Our fleet. Its capability. Its readiness. And the safety envelope." Amina asked. "Firing arcs, exclusion zones, thermal spillover. This station houses civilians." A pause, brief, but real. "Of course," Sarketh said. "All precautions will be observed." "I'll need the figures," Amina continued. "Reactor outputs, sustained firing durations, shield discharge limits." Transparency builds trust. This time the murmurs were sharper. Sarketh studied her, head tilting. You are thorough. Experience, Amina said. It's usually cheaper than regret. The Admiral laughed, a deep sound that echoed pleasantly. Very well. The data will be provided. He tapped the table, and the observation window brightened. Space folded. A Vayari battleship translated into view, vast and luminous, its armored ribs glowing faintly along its spine. Gasps swept the chamber. Even Amina felt the weight of it, the sheer mass, the deliberate beauty of its construction. It was a vessel designed to be seen, to be remembered. Behold, Sarketh said. Peace, enforced. Amina didn't look at the ship. She looked at the heat distortion bleeding from its radiators, the way station sensors flickered as systems compensated. Impressive, she thought. And expensive. The demonstration will proceed, Sarketh continued. Afterward, we will formalize a protection compact. For humanity's benefit, of course. The words hung there, polished and sharp. Amina met his gaze. We'll need time to review any agreement. Independent arbitration. Clear limits on patrol authority. Civilian corridor protections. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sarketh's smile remained. Ambitious terms. Necessary ones. He leaned back, considering her as one might a curious mechanism. Perhaps, he said slowly, it would be helpful for the Assembly to understand humanity's own doctrine. A comparison. Amina felt every eye swing toward her. You wish us to demonstrate? She asked. Joint exercise, Sarketh said lightly. Trust is built in shared risk. A trap, clean and well lit. Understood, Amina said. We'll participate. Provided the exercise zone includes a debris field and full civilian safety protocols. Sarketh blinked, surprised despite himself. Then he smiled wider. Agreed. As the chamber began to stir, Chen leaned close. Our ships are 2 hours out. Good, Amina said. She finally looked back at the battleship, its glowing spine reflected in the glass. Let them enjoy the view. Her comm chimed, 3 short pulses. Human ships had arrived. Not with spectacle. With silence. The Vayari knew how to stage a moment. The observation window widened, polarizing to accommodate the glare as the first battleship drifted into full view. It was immense, longer than a city spine, layered with armor that curved like cathedral buttresses. Luminous conduits traced its hull, pulsing with restrained energy. The ship did not hurry. It arrived as if the void itself had invited it. Around Amina Reyes, the assembly inhaled as one. Magnificent, whispered a delegate behind her, or barely contained. They say each one takes decades to craft. Amina kept her eyes on the data feed scrolling across her wrist display. Power curves. Heat dissipation rates. Shield cycling intervals. The numbers told a story the hull did not. A costly one. High Admiral Sarketh stood at the center dais, basking in the silence. This, he said, spreading his hands, is a Vanguard-class peacekeeper. One of 20. The word peacekeeper echoed with practiced irony. Another ship translated in. Then another. They formed a deliberate arc beyond the station, an armored crescent glittering against the stars. Each arrival was timed, spaced to maximize impact. The station's gravity compensators hummed as systems adjusted to the mass nearby. Formation is ceremonial, Chen murmured over the private channel. They're burning power just to hold that curve. Let them, Amina replied. Ceremony has a fuel budget. Sarketh gestured, and the lights dimmed further. Observe. A target drone, an asteroid core stripped of atmosphere, was towed into the designated range. Its surface was pocked and inert, a convenient victim. The first Vayari ship aligned, hull panels shifting with hydraulic grace. A beam lanced out. Plasma tore across the void, incandescent and violent, striking the rock with a force that turned silence into spectacle. The asteroid bloomed, surface liquefying, fragments peeling away in a slow, terrible ballet. Heat flared across the sensors. The chamber's environmental systems compensated again. Gasps rippled outward. Amina watched the thermal bloom spike and decay. Sustained output? She asked quietly. Chen checked. Hi. They can't hold that for long without venting. As if on cue, radiator spines along the firing ship flared brighter, bleeding excess heat in shimmering waves. Beautiful. Wasteful. Sarketh continued, voice smooth as the display. Our shields. The next ship advanced. Its barrier field ignited, a translucent lattice that caught the starlight and bent it into shimmering arcs. A kinetic slug, launched from a distant platform, slammed into the shield and disintegrated, energy dispersing in a blinding flash. Applause broke out. Not loud. Careful. Respectful in the way fear teaches. Amina felt eyes flick toward her. Measuring. Waiting. The final act was kinetic. A Vayari hammer round accelerated to obscene velocity and struck what remained of the target. The asteroid did not explode. It ceased. Reduced to a cloud of glittering debris that expanded outward, harmless within the safety envelope. Peace, Sarketh said softly, through certainty. The lights rose. The battleships held position, glowing like gods at rest. Sarketh turned to Amina. Humanity now understands the stability we offer. Amina folded her hands. I understand the cost, she said. In energy, materials, and maintenance. A ripple of surprise crossed the dais. Stability, Sarketh corrected, has a price. So does dependence, Amina replied. She glanced at the smaller delegates, at the way some avoided her gaze. What happens when a protector decides protection requires concessions? The Admiral's smile thinned. You imply much. I ask plainly, Amina said. Your compact grants patrol authority in civilian corridors. That affects trade. Lives. It ensures order. For whom? She asked. Silence stretched. Sarketh let it, confident in the weight behind him. Perhaps, he said at last, this discussion would benefit from balance. A comparison. You agreed to a joint exercise. Yes, Amina said. Within agreed constraints. Of course, he replied. We are not unreasonable. The exercise zone materialized on the display, an expanse threaded with debris from old conflicts and failed colonies. Jagged shapes drifted in lazy vectors, a graveyard of metal and stone. You chose an interesting field, Sarketh noted. Conflict rarely offers clean lines, Amina said. We prefer realism. The Vayari fleet began to reposition, their formation tightening with practiced ease. Power signatures rose as weapons primed, not to fire, but to remind. A delegate leaned toward Amina, voice low and urgent. Commander, please. Accept their terms. They keep the lanes safe. Amina met their eyes. They keep the lanes obedient. The delegate swallowed and looked away. Across the chamber, a murmur spread as new contacts appeared on the long-range display. Small. Angular. Unadorned. That's them. Someone whispered. Those are human ships. They arrived without flourish. Matte hulls absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. No glowing spines. No ceremonial spacing. They slid into position with economical thrusts, aligning along the edge of the debris field. Sarketh regarded them with open curiosity. Modest, he said. Practical, perhaps. Affordable, Amina said. That matters. The Admiral laughed lightly. Numbers do not replace presence. Sometimes, Amina replied, they replace necessity. The exercise timer began its countdown. Vayari ships advanced first, their movement smooth and confident. Plasma arrays charged, energy signatures climbing like a rising tide. They did not fire. Not yet. The threat was enough. Human ships responded by doing very little. They drifted. Adjusted. Released a scattering of objects that bloomed across sensors. Tiny, unremarkable. What are those? Sarketh asked. Debris, Amina said. Just, organized. The countdown hit 0. A Vayari plasma lance flashed, not aimed to strike, but to bracket, to herd. The beam carved luminous lines through the field, vaporizing fragments, lighting the void. The human response was subtle. The scattered objects ignited microthrusters, altering vectors by fractions. The debris field shifted, reflections multiplying, sensor returns blurring into false depth. Sensor noise increasing, a Vayari officer reported, irritation edging their voice. "Filter it," Sarketh snapped. The human ships remained quiet. No flares. No answering fire. Then a Vayari escort ship's alarm spiked. "Radiator damage," came the report. "Minor, but heat buildup rising." No explosion. No flash. Just a clean slice through a thermal fin, the kind of damage that didn't look dramatic until systems began to fail. Sarketh straightened. Amina watched the data scroll. One precise rail strike. Silent. Deliberate. "End the exchange," a Vayari voice demanded. Amina didn't smile. "We can," she said evenly. "If you wish." Beyond the glass, human ships adjusted course, their movements suddenly purposeful. Panels along their hulls shifted. Structures unfolded. Radiator wings bloomed. They glowed faintly as heat poured out, controlled and steady, like a creature exhaling before a long run. Sarketh stared at the display, something new flickering behind his eyes. For the first time, the cathedral fleet did not look invincible. It looked hot. And Amina knew the demonstration had finally become honest. The battlefield changed without announcing itself. Human ships did not surge forward or flare their drives. They adjusted, fractions of degrees, minute thrusts that looked indecisive until the pattern emerged. Vayari sensors struggled to pin them down, returned smearing as reflections multiplied through the debris field. Every drifting shard became a question mark. "Contacts are unstable," a Vayari tactical officer reported. Multiple returns overlapping. No clear firing solutions. High Admiral Sarketha's claws tightened on the edge of the dais. "Refine your filters." "We are refining, Admiral. The noise is adaptive." Amina Reyes watched the same data and felt a familiar calm settle into her chest. This was the part most species never trained for, the moment when spectacle failed and thinking had to replace it. "Human ships are not jamming," Chen said quietly. "They're teaching the sensors to lie to themselves." The first Vayari volley came cautiously. Plasma packets arced through the field, bright and devastating where they struck, carving molten paths through tumbling wreckage. The effect was impressive and useless. Each blast cleared a corridor that immediately filled again as debris shifted, nudged by invisible hands. "Predictive models are collapsing," another Vayari voice snapped. "Targets do not behave like ships." "That's because they aren't," Amina said. "Not individually." She leaned forward. "Admiral, we should clarify objectives. This is a demonstration, not a contest." Sarketh didn't look at her. "It became a contest when your ships damaged ours." "Disabled a radiator fin," Amina corrected. "Non-lethal. Within exercise parameters." Beyond the glass, a Vayari escort began to glow along its hull seams, heat failing to escape fast enough. It pulled back, power bleeding down as systems throttled to prevent internal damage. The second strike came faster. No warning flash. No audible cue. A rail round slipped through the chaos and clipped another ship's thermal array. The effect was subtle and cruel. Alarms spiked. Shields flickered, not from impact, but from overheating reactors struggling to compensate. Sarketh turned sharply. "Cease this approach." Amina met his gaze. "We're demonstrating our doctrine." "And what doctrine is that?" he demanded. "Control," she said. "Not destruction." Human drones emerged then, not in a swarm, but in layers. Some were barely larger than toolkits, their profiles optimized for interception. Others were thin lattices that unfolded into point defense webs, knitting temporary shields that moved with the flow of debris. Vayari plasma met those webs and diffused, energy bled away in controlled dispersal. Not blocked. Spent. "Impossible," someone whispered. "No," Amina said. "Expensive to counter." The Vayari fleet attempted to reassert order. Formation tightened. Command signals spiked as central coordination increased. It made them sharper and more predictable. Human vessels are exploiting our synchronization, a senior officer said. They're targeting latency. Amina nodded. Distributed mines beat a single conductor every time. A Vayari battleship powered up its main lance, energy building like a held breath. The beam fired, brilliant and terrifying, cutting a line through space where human ship had been moments before. It missed. Not because the human ship was faster, but because it had already moved. The decision hadn't come from a bridge. It had come from the network, hundreds of micro-choices made and agreed upon in the time it took the Vayari command to blink. The Atlas loom shifted then, unfolding further. Radiator wings extended to full span, latticed veins glowing a controlled amber as heat poured away. Along its spine, apertures slid open, revealing rail arrays that aligned with mathematical indifference. "Admiral," a Vayari officer said, voice tight, "their thermal output just dropped. Weapon readiness increasing." Sarketh stared at the display. "They vent heat to fight longer." "Yes," Amina said. "We plan for endurance." A human rail salvo followed, not aimed at hulls, but at space itself. The round struck points in the debris field, triggering cascades. Chaff ignited, reflective dust bloomed, and the battlefield fractured into layers of false depth. Vayari targeting solutions shattered under the load. A smaller delegate stood, unable to contain themselves. "They're turning the field into a maze." "No," Amina said gently. "A mirror." Another Vayari ship faltered, forced to power down non-essential systems. It drifted, alive but toothless. The message was clear. "End the exercise," Sarketh said, voice hard. "We can," Amina replied. "On your signal." The Admiral hesitated. Pride warred with calculation. He gestured sharply. "Hold fire," he ordered. Human ships complied instantly. Drones retracted. Rail arrays cooled. The debris field settled into a slow, drifting calm. Silence returned. Amina exhaled and finally stood. "High Admiral, this outcome was avoidable." "You humiliate us," Sarketh said. "I prevent escalation," she answered. "There's a difference." He studied her, eyes narrowed. "Your ships are unconventional." "They are honest," Amina said. "They do what they're built to do without pretending." Sarketh turned to the assembly, to the watching delegates whose fear had shifted into something else, uncertain, hopeful. "You see," he said. "Humanity plays dangerous games." Amina stepped beside him. "We play survivable ones." She gestured, and new schematics bloomed across the display. Logistics tenders at extreme range, modular fabrication units, layered supply lines feeding the fleet. Not secret. Not hidden. Simply there. "Our battleships aren't monuments," she continued. "They're hubs. They assume damage. They assume loss. They keep working." A murmur swept the chamber. Sarketh's voice lowered. "And how many of these hubs do you possess?" Amina met his gaze evenly. "Enough." The word carried weight because it wasn't dramatic. The Admiral looked back at his fleet, brilliant, costly, momentarily checked. He saw what she wanted him to see. Every glowing spine was a liability, every masterpiece a single point of failure. "This demonstration ends," he said at last. "We will revisit terms." Amina inclined her head. "That's all we ask." As the fleets disengaged, human ships folding themselves back into quiet readiness, Amina felt the room change. The corridor of smiles she'd entered now held something sharper, possibility edged with caution. Chen leaned close. "They understand now." "Yes," Amina said softly, watching the Atlas loom retract its wings, becoming unremarkable once more. They finally heard the silence. And in that silence, the old order began to sweat. The assembly chamber felt different once the ships pulled back. Not quieter, space never truly was, but thinner, as if a membrane had been punctured and something real had seeped through. The observation window now showed empty lanes where power and arrogance had just collided and stepped away. Debris drifted in lazy vectors, harmless again, stripped of intention. High Admiral Sarketh remained standing. He had not returned to his seat. Humanity, he said, voice measured now, has demonstrated ingenuity. Amina Reyes did not accept the offered framing. She stepped forward, hands loose at her sides. We demonstrated restraint. A ripple moved through the delegates. Some leaned in. Others stiffened, unused to hearing power spoken of without ornament. Sarketh turned slowly, studying her. You could have pressed the advantage. Yes, Amina said. And then we would have taught the wrong lesson. He angled his head. Explain. Fear decays, she replied. It works quickly, then fails catastrophically. We prefer systems that age well. She gestured, and the display shifted. Not weapons, flows. Trade corridors. Repair nodes. Logistics graphs that showed supply moving like blood through arteries. The human fleet was no longer visible as ships, but as relationships. These are not reinforcements, Amina said, anticipating the accusation. They are infrastructure. We didn't bring more guns. We brought the ability to stay. A delegate rose, a small, furred being whose species had lost 3 outposts to protective oversight. You mean, you could maintain this presence? Amina met their eyes. Indefinitely. At tolerable cost. Sarketh's claws flexed. And you expect us to believe this is benevolence? No, Amina said. We expect you to believe it's reality. She turned to the assembly as a whole. Our ships are built for repair, not reverence. Components swap in hours. Crews rotate without ceremony. Losses are planned for. That's not because we're cruel. It's because we've lived long enough to know perfection is fragile. Silence held. Sarketh exhaled, a slow release. You would append the balance. Amina nodded. Balances shift when they stop serving the many. He studied the projections again, the quiet implication of them. If conflict came, he said, your fleets would suffer. Yes. And continue. Yes. The admission carried more weight than any threat. A senior Vayari officer leaned in, whispering urgently. Sarketh listened, his posture tightening, then straightening again as a decision settled into him like armor. You risk much by revealing this, he said to Amina. She shook her head. We risk more by hiding it. Sarketh turned to the dais. The proposed compact, he said, voice carrying, will be amended. The word sparked murmurs. Some relieved. Some alarmed. Amina remained still. Patrol authority, Sarketh continued, will be shared. Civilian corridors designated neutral. Arbitration independent. The smaller delegates reacted first. Relief spread in uneven waves. Hope was dangerous here, but it surfaced anyway. And humanity? He asked, fixing Amina with a keen stare. What do you concede? She considered. Transparency. Mutual access to safety data. Joint emergency response drills. Sarketh almost smiled. You trade power for predictability. We trade fear for planning. He laughed then, not the earlier performance, but something quieter. You are inconvenient. History says that's survivable, Amina replied. A pause stretched between them, filled with the hum of a station that had just watched its assumptions break. Very well, Sarketh said at last. The hegemony recognizes humanity as a stabilizing force. It was not an apology. It was not surrender. It was enough. As formalities began, aids moving, data slates passing hands, Amina allowed herself a single breath. Not relief, focus easing into vigilance. This was not an ending. It was a hinge. Chen leaned close. They'll test the edges. They always do, Amina said. We'll be there when they do. Beyond the window, the Atlas loom folded its radiator wings, shedding the last traces of heat. It became unremarkable again, another dark shape among many. Purposeful. Forgettable. A delegate approached Amina hesitantly. Commander, If you had not shown them, they would have learned eventually, Amina said gently. We just chose the timing. And if they had refused? Amina looked out at the stars. Then we would have left. Opened other routes. Built elsewhere. Empires rot when no one needs them. The delegate nodded slowly, understanding dawning like a sunrise they'd never expected to see. When the chamber finally emptied, Sarketh lingered. You know, he said, almost conversationally, we thought your kind would be impressed by our battleships. Amina met his gaze. We were. And yet, we build things to outlast applause. He inclined his head, a gesture of respect among his kind. Then perhaps, he said, we have more to learn. Everyone does, Amina replied. As she turned to leave, the corridor no longer felt like a gallery of watchful smiles. It felt like a crossroads. Outside, space waited, vast, indifferent, honest. Humanity had learned long ago how to survive in that honesty. And now, the galaxy was beginning to learn what that meant.